Have you ever passed a note that saved someone's life? Zara didn't expect her Tuesday shift at the Constellation Lounge to end with blood on the floor. But the moment she saw the new waiter's eyes linger too long on her boss, she knew something was catastrophically wrong. The Constellation Lounge sat on the edge of Sector 7, a sprawling space station where humans and aliens conducted business under the fragile treaty that had ended 3 decades of war. And Zara had worked there for 2 years, long enough to spot when someone didn't belong. The lounge catered to high-profile clients, diplomats, corporate executives, and the occasional celebrity, which meant security was supposed to be tight, backgrounds thoroughly checked. And yet here was this man she'd never seen before, wearing a waiter's uniform that didn't quite fit, moving through the dining room with the predatory grace of someone trained for violence rather than service. Zara balanced a tray of Andromedan cocktails on her shoulder, her heart hammering as she watched him from the corner of her eye, noting how his gaze never left Lyria Castellan, the lounge's owner and the reason Zara came to work every day with butterflies in her stomach. Lyria was extraordinary in every sense, a seraphine who had fled her war-torn homeworld and built an empire here among the stars. And though she looked almost entirely human, with her delicate features and flawless porcelain skin that seemed to glow faintly under the lounge's ambient lighting, her elegantly pointed ears and the silver hair that cascaded down her back in waves marked her as something more. She wore a fitted charcoal blazer over a sleek white top and tailored pants that were both professional and striking, commanding the room without effort as she moved between tables, greeting guests with that warm smile that made Zara's chest tighten every single time. But Lyria didn't see what Zara saw, didn't notice how the fake waiter's hand kept drifting to his left side, where something bulky disrupted the line of his jacket, didn't catch the way he positioned himself to maintain a clear line of sight to her at all times. Think, Zara, think. She couldn't just shout a warning, not in a room full of jumpy diplomats who'd survived assassination attempts, not when causing a panic might trigger exactly the violence she was trying to prevent. She delivered the cocktails to a table of Centaurian traders with a smile that felt like glass on her face, her mind racing through options and discarding them just as quickly. Her communicator? No, if he was watching Lyria, he might be monitoring communications. Security? They were stationed at the entrances, too far away to intervene, before he could draw whatever weapon he was carrying. It had to be subtle, had to be something that would warn Lyria without alerting him. And then Zara's eyes fell on the stack of cloth napkins at the service station, and she knew what she had to do. She grabbed a napkin and a pen, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system, and wrote in quick, clean letters, "Listen, fake waiter, armed, left side." Short, direct, impossible to misunderstand. And she folded it once before scanning the room to find Lyria now standing near the bar, reviewing something on a datapad with Marcus, the head bartender. Zara moved with purpose but not panic, weaving through tables with the practiced ease of someone who'd navigated this floor 1,000 times. And as she approached, Lyria glanced up, those incredible violet eyes meeting hers with a flicker of curiosity. "Miss Castellan," Zara said, her voice level and professional. "You have something on your jacket." It was a flimsy excuse, but Lyria's eyebrows rose only slightly as Zara stepped closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of starflowers that always seemed to cling to Lyria's skin, close enough to see the tiny flecks of gold in those violet eyes. Zara made a show of brushing at Lyria's shoulder with one hand, while pressing the folded napkin into her palm with the other, their fingers touching for just a heartbeat. And she saw the exact moment understanding flickered across Lyria's face. To her credit, Lyria didn't react, didn't look around or tense up in a way that would alert their threat. She simply closed her fingers around the napkin and gave Zara the barest nod, her expression remaining pleasantly neutral. "Thank you, Zara," she said, her voice carrying that musical quality that made every word sound like a song. Always so attentive. Then Lyria turned back to Marcus as if nothing had happened. But Zara saw her unfold the napkin below the bar's edge, saw her read the message, saw the subtle shift in her posture that meant she'd switched from business owner to the former resistance fighter she'd been during the war. What happened next unfolded with surreal slowness, each second stretching like taffy as Lyria's eyes tracked across the room and found the fake waiter, who was now moving with increased purpose toward the private dining area where a Varelian ambassador was scheduled to arrive in 10 minutes. Lyria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and she touched her earpiece. activating what Zara knew was a direct line to station security. Speaking in a murmur too quiet for anyone but Marcus to hear, the fake waiter must have sensed something was wrong. Some animal instinct warning him that his cover was blown, because he suddenly changed direction, heading straight for Lyria, with his hand now openly reaching for his left side. And time snapped back to normal speed as everything went to hell. Gun! Zara shouted, the word ripping from her throat as the man pulled a sleek plasma pistol from under his jacket. And the lounge erupted into chaos, guests screaming and diving under tables, while servers scattered like startled birds. But Lyria moved with liquid grace, vaulting over the bar with an athleticism that shocked everyone who thought of her as just a beautiful business owner. And her hand came up holding something small and silver that Zara recognized as a neural disruptor. Illegal on most stations, but apparently part of Lyria's insurance policy. The fake waiter fired, a bolt of superheated plasma scorching through the space where Lyria's head had been a second earlier, and the mirror behind the bar exploded in a shower of glittering fragments. Zara's training from her brief stint in station security kicked in, and instead of freezing, she grabbed a metal serving tray and hurled it at the gunman like a discus, catching him in the shoulder hard enough to spoil his next shot. He snarled and turned toward her, and Zara felt ice flood her veins as she stared down the barrel of his weapon, her life suddenly measured in the half-second it would take him to pull the trigger. Then Lyria was there, moving faster than should have been possible, her hand closing around the man's wrist and twisting with devastating efficiency, and the sickening crack of breaking bone echoed through the lounge as the gun clattered to the floor. The man tried to throw a punch with his other hand, but Lyria ducked under it and swept his legs, slamming him face first into the polished floor with enough force to knock the fight out of him. She pressed her knee into his back and held the neural disruptor to the base of his skull, her silver hair disheveled and her eyes blazing with cold fury that made her look every bit the warrior she'd once been. Zara, are you hurt? Lyria called out, not taking her eyes off the subdued attacker. And the fact that this was her first question, asked before checking on any of the high-profile guests, sent a warm flutter through Zara's chest. Despite the circumstances, I'm okay, Zara managed, though her hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. Station security burst through the entrances moments later, weapons drawn and looking almost disappointed that the situation was already resolved. And they took custody of the would-be assassin, hauling him to his feet and searching him for additional weapons while the senior officer took Lyria's statement. The lounge was a disaster. Tables overturned, glass and spilled drinks everywhere, and traumatized guests being ushered out by apologetic staff. But all Zara could focus on was Lyria, who had finally straightened up and was scanning the room until her eyes found Zara's. The look that passed between them held weight, significance that went beyond employer and employee, beyond savior and saved. And Lyria crossed the debris-strewn floor with deliberate steps until she stood directly in front of Zara, close enough that Zara could see a small cut on Lyria's cheekbone from a glass shard. You saved my life, Lyria said quietly, and there was something raw in her voice, something vulnerable, that Zara had never heard before. I just passed a note, Zara replied, trying to downplay it, trying to ignore how her heart was racing for entirely different reasons now. Don't, Lyria said, and she reached out, her fingers gentle as they touched Zara's hand. Don't diminish what you did. You saw a threat, you acted quickly and cleverly, and you put yourself at risk to warn me. That's not nothing, Zara, that's everything. The way she said Zara's name, with such tenderness and intensity, made the rest of the world fade to background noise, and Zara found herself drowning in violet eyes that held galaxies of unspoken feeling. I couldn't let anything happen to you, Zara admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I've been watching you for 2 years, and I know that's probably inappropriate because you're my boss. But I had to say it because life is short and people with guns can show up anywhere, and Lyria silenced her rambling by taking both of Zara's hands in hers, the touch sending electricity racing up Zara's arms. I've been watching you too, Lyria confessed, a soft smile curving her lips. Wondering if you felt even a fraction of what I feel every time you walk into a room. Wondering if I was imagining the way you look at me sometimes. Like I'm not just the boss, but something more. Zara's breath caught, her mind struggling to process that this moment was actually happening. That the woman she'd been hopelessly infatuated with for 2 years was standing here admitting mutual feelings in the wreckage of an assassination attempt. This is insane, Zara whispered. This is terrible timing, Lyria agreed. We should probably focus on the investigation and the insurance claims and the fact that my business just became a crime scene. Absolutely, Zara said. That's the responsible thing to do. Neither of them moved, still standing there, holding hands while security officers worked around them, and Marcus tried to salvage what he could from behind the ruined bar. Lyria, the security captain called out, breaking the spell. We need to discuss protection detail. Whoever sent this assassin might try again. Lyria's expression shifted, the soft vulnerability hardening back into the capable executive. But she didn't let go of Zara's hands immediately, giving them a gentle squeeze first. We'll talk, she promised. After I handle this, we'll talk properly. Zara nodded, not trusting her voice, and watched as Lyria walked over to confer with security, already shifting back into command mode, issuing orders and making decisions with calm authority. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements and cleanup, the lounge closing early while investigators combed through evidence and tried to trace the assassin's origins. And Zara learned that he'd been a hired mercenary, part of a group that opposed the human-alien peace treaty and saw Lyria as a symbol of cooperation they wanted to destroy. It was bigger than a personal grudge, bigger than business rivalry, and the station authorities were taking it extremely seriously, which meant armed guards and restricted access, and a level of scrutiny that made everyone uncomfortable. Zara gave her statement 3 separate times, each investigator asking slightly different versions of the same questions, and by the time they finally let her go, exhaustion was pulling at her bones, and her adrenaline crash had left her shaky and cold. She found Marcus in the back office, already working on inventory for the damaged stock, and he looked up with sympathetic eyes. She's in her private quarters, he said, without preamble. Top floor. She asked me to tell you, when you were done, if you wanted to go up. Zara's heart did a complicated flip. I look like hell, she protested weakly, gesturing at her stained uniform and disheveled hair. Marcus smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from anyone in hours. Kid, I don't think she's going to care. Go. So Zara went, taking the private elevator that required a special key card, which Marcus had pressed into her hand with a knowing look, and tried not to think too hard about what she was doing or what might happen, or all the ways this could complicate her life. The elevator opened directly into Lyria's apartment, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the station's glittering interior, and Zara stepped out onto polished floors, taking in the minimalist furniture and the artwork from a dozen different worlds. I wasn't sure you'd come, Lyria's voice came from the balcony, and Zara turned to see her silhouetted against the stars, no longer in her business attire, but wearing soft gray pants and a simple fitted top, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. I wasn't sure you actually wanted me to, Zara admitted, walking out to join her. Or if it was just the adrenaline talking earlier. Lyria turned to face her fully, and in the softer light, she looked younger, less guarded, more like the person she might have been if war and loss hadn't shaped her. I don't say things I don't mean, she said seriously. Especially not things like that. They stood there for a moment. 2 women who'd survived violence together, who'd admitted feelings in the worst possible circumstances, and now had to figure out what came next. Tell me about yourself, Lyria said suddenly. I know you're an excellent waitress. You're observant and brave, but I don't actually know the important things. What's your favorite color? What did you want to be when you were a child? What makes you laugh? The request was so unexpected and so sincere that Zara found herself laughing, the tension breaking like a popped balloon. Blue, she said, like Earth's oceans, which I've only seen in pictures because I grew up on Mars Colony. I wanted to be a pilot, but motion sickness made that impractical, so I became a server instead, which my mother said was a waste of my potential. And terrible jokes make me laugh, the worse the better. Lyria's smile widened, genuine and warm. I wanted to be a teacher, she offered in return. Before the war, I loved ancient literature and thought I'd spend my life discussing poetry with students. Then my world chose the wrong side in a conflict we didn't start, and I spent 15 years fighting instead of teaching. There was such sadness in that admission, such weight of lost dreams, and Zara acted on instinct, reaching out to take Lyria's hand again. You could still teach, she said gently. The war's over. You could do anything you want. I'm doing what I want, Lyria said, her fingers intertwining with Zara's. I built something here, a place where different species can gather without fear, where old enemies can share a meal and remember, They're all just people trying to survive in a complicated universe. It's not poetry, but it matters. It definitely matters, Zara agreed. And for what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary. The word hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning, and Lyria stepped closer, free hand coming up to cup Zara's cheek with infinite gentleness. May I kiss you? She asked, the question, a whisper, respectful and hopeful and terrifying all at once. Zara's answer was to close the remaining distance, pressing her lips to Lyria's in a kiss that was soft and sweet and perfect, tasting of starflowers and possibility and everything she'd been hoping for without admitting it to herself. They kissed like they had all the time in the world, slow and exploratory, learning the shape of each other. And when they finally pulled apart, both were smiling like idiots. I should probably mention, Lyria said, slightly breathless, that station regulations require me to file paperwork if I'm in a relationship with an employee. Conflict of interest protocols and all that. Zara raised an eyebrow. Are we in a relationship? I'd very much like to be, Lyria said. If you're interested in trying, knowing that it might be complicated and that people might talk, and that someone apparently wants me dead, which could make dating somewhat hazardous. When you put it that way, how can I resist? Zara teased, but she sobered quickly. Seriously though, yes, I'm interested, complications and all. But I do have one condition. Name it. You teach me some of that combat training, Zara said firmly. Because if we're going to be together and people are going to be shooting at you, I want to be able to do more than throw serving trays, Lyria laughed. The sound bright and genuine, and it was the most beautiful thing Zara had ever heard. Deal, she agreed. I'll teach you everything I know, starting tomorrow if you want. They talked for hours after that, sitting on Lyria's balcony and watching the station's artificial day cycle through to night, sharing stories and secrets and the kind of honest conversation that felt like building a foundation. Zara learned that Lyria had a younger brother she was still searching for, lost during the final evacuation of their homeworld, and that her greatest fear was forgetting the faces of the friends she'd lost in the war. Lyria learned that Zara wrote poetry in her spare time, terrible sonnets that she'd never shown anyone, and that she'd taken the job at the Constellation Lounge specifically because she'd seen Lyria once in the station market and been struck by the sadness in her eyes, wanting to be near her for reasons she couldn't explain. When Zara finally left, the station's corridors were quiet with late-night cycle, and she felt like she was floating, her exhaustion forgotten in the glow of new beginnings. The next few weeks were intense, with security investigations ongoing and new protocols implemented throughout the lounge. But they were also wonderful in ways Zara had never expected. Lyria kept her promise about combat training, and they spent early mornings in the station's gym, where Lyria taught her defensive techniques with patience and precision. Their sessions often ending with both of them laughing and breathless, stealing kisses between rounds. The staff figured out pretty quickly that something had shifted between their boss and their coworker. But instead of judgment, Zara found acceptance. Marcus especially making a point of rearranging schedules so she and Lyria could have proper time off together. They went on actual dates, discovering each other in context beyond the lounge, visiting art galleries and trying restaurants from a dozen different cultures. And Zara discovered that Lyria was funny when she relaxed, with a dry wit that could make her snort with laughter at unexpected moments. The investigators eventually tracked down the organization that had hired the assassin, a radical group that was systematically dismantled by station security. And while the threat never entirely disappeared, Lyria was too prominent a figure for that it diminished enough that the armed guards were reduced and life started to feel normal again. 3 months after the attack, Lyria called a staff meeting in the newly renovated lounge, which had been upgraded with better security systems and reinforced with materials that could withstand weapons fire, just in case. I want to thank all of you, she said, addressing the assembled servers, bartenders, and kitchen staff, for your loyalty during a difficult time. This place is more than a business to me. It's family, and family protects each other. Her eyes found Zara's across the room, and the smile she gave her was private and warm. Because of the quick thinking and bravery of our team, we're not just surviving, we're thriving. Reservations are up, we've been featured in Galactic Dining Monthly, and we're expanding our private event services. There was applause and cheering, genuine pride in what they'd built together. And after the meeting, as people dispersed to prepare for the evening service, Lyria caught Zara's hand and pulled her into her office. I have something for you, Lyria said, reaching into her desk and pulling out a small box. It's not what you think, she added quickly, seeing Zara's eyes widen. I'm not proposing. We've only been together 3 months. But I wanted to give you this. She opened the box to reveal a delicate pendant, a stylized star made of silver metal that seemed to glow with inner light. It's from my homeworld, Lyria explained softly. One of the few things I managed to bring with me. In Seraphine culture, we give these to people who've changed our lives, who've pulled us back from darkness. You did that for me, Zara. You saved my life, literally, with that napkin. But you've also saved it in ways that matter more. Reminding me that I'm allowed to be happy. That my whole existence doesn't have to be defined by loss. Zara felt tears prick her eyes as she took the pendant, feeling the slight warmth of it against her palm. Lyria, I can't take something this precious, she protested. You can and you will, Lyria said firmly, taking the pendant and fastening it around Zara's neck herself, her fingers gentle against Zara's skin. Because you're precious to me, and I want you to have it. Zara touched the pendant, feeling its weight settle against her chest, and then she pulled Lyria into a fierce hug. I love you, she whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and inevitable. I know it's early, and maybe I'm not supposed to say it yet, but I do. I love you. Lyria pulled back just enough to cup Zara's face in both hands, her violet eyes shining with emotion. I love you too, she said. I have for a while, if I'm honest. I was just afraid to admit it. Afraid that loving someone would give the universe another way to hurt me. But you're worth the risk. You're worth everything. They kissed then, deep and meaningful, a promise and a declaration, and when they finally broke apart, both were smiling through happy tears. The evening service was busy as always, the Constellation Lounge filled with diplomats and traders and tourists all seeking good food and neutral ground. And Zara moved through the familiar routines with new lightness in her step. She caught Lyria's eye multiple times throughout the night, exchanging glances that held entire conversations. And each time she touched the pendant at her throat, she was reminded of how a single moment of observation, a few words scrawled on a napkin, had changed the trajectory of her entire life. As the night wound down and the last guest departed, Zara helped with closing procedures, wiping down tables alongside the other servers while Marcus counted out the register and Lyria did her final walkthrough of the dining room. You know, Marcus said, appearing at Zara's elbow with his characteristic quiet timing, I've worked for Lyria for 5 years, and I've never seen her like this. Happy, I mean, really happy, not just content or satisfied, but genuinely joyful. That's because of you. Zara felt warmth spread through her chest. She makes me happy too, she said simply. Good, Marcus replied. You both deserve it. And for the record, I knew from day one that you were gone for her. The way you used to watch her when you thought no one was looking. Dead giveaway. Zara laughed, shaking her head. Was I that obvious? Completely, Marcus confirmed with a grin. But it was sweet and patient. You never pushed or made her uncomfortable, just quietly adored her from afar, until the universe gave you a chance to be a hero. It's very romantic, in a terrifying, life or death kind of way. I could have done without the gun, Zara admitted. But yeah, I guess it worked out. Lyria joined them, sliding an arm around Zara's waist with easy affection that still made Zara's heart skip. What worked out? She asked. Everything, Zara said, leaning into her. Absolutely everything. They finished, closing together, the three of them working in comfortable silence. And when the last light was dimmed and the doors were locked, Lyria and Zara took the elevator up to the apartment that had become their shared space. Zara having gradually moved her belongings in over the past month until it felt like home. They stood on the balcony again, in the spot where they'd first kissed, looking out at the station that had brought them together. This impossible intersection of cultures and species all trying to coexist among the stars. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't seen him? Lyria asked quietly. If you'd been on break, or distracted, or just not paying attention. Zara considered it. Sometimes, she admitted, but then I stop, because it doesn't matter. I did see him. I did act. We're here now, and that's what counts. Listen, fake waiter, armed, left side, Lyria quoted, the words that had been seared into both their memories. 9 words that saved my life and changed yours. Best napkin note in history, Zara said with a small smile. Definitely better than call me or you're cute. Lyria laughed and turned to face her fully, taking both Zara's hands in hers. "Promise me something," she said, her tone turning serious. "Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter what dangers come or what challenges we face, we'll always be honest with each other like that. Direct, clear, no games or hidden meanings. Just truth, I promise," Zara said without hesitation. "Always truth, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." They sealed the promise with a kiss, gentle and sweet, and in that moment, Zara felt the certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the right person, having taken exactly the right risks. The universe was vast and often dangerous, full of old grudges and new threats, but it was also full of possibility, of second chances and unlikely love stories, of brave moments and quiet devotion. Somewhere on a war-torn world, a young Seraphine had dreamed of teaching poetry, and on a Mars colony, a human child had dreamed of flying among the stars, and neither could have imagined that their paths would cross in a lounge on a space station, brought together by violence and sealed by a napkin note. But that was the thing about the future, Zara reflected, as she and Lyria stood wrapped in each other's arms beneath artificial stars. You could never predict it, could never anticipate which small choices would ripple into life-changing consequences. All you could do was pay attention, act with courage when moments demanded it, and hold tight to the people who made the journey worthwhile. And as the station cycled toward morning, and the first light of a new day began to glow through distant windows, Zara knew that whatever came next, whatever challenges or joys awaited them, she and Lyria would face it together. And that made all the difference in the universe.